Hello! So this evening we are going to take a look at the JustFlight PA-28 Arrow 3. So the PA-28s are a famous line of aircraft. I think their collective name are the Piper Cherokees. But yeah, this is the JustFlight version of the Piper Arrow 3. So let's go and jump inside. It's fairly basic. I've removed all of the cleverness from the cockpit because what we're going to do today is work through the procedure of starting up the PA-28 Arrow 3 and do it fairly closely to the pilot operating handbook, so as closely as we can within the simulator with the tools we have in the simulator. So we'll check the things we can and we'll work through it. It's actually worth saying I did a little look at this earlier on, and I discovered during the checklist, while checking the things on the checklist, that my controllers weren't working correctly. So it just goes to prove using the checklists in the simulator is absolutely worth it. So doing things properly ensures that you're going to have a good outcome. Okay, so where are we? We are at Orcas Island. So if you've seen this in the simulator before, let's turn off some of the details so we can see exactly where we are. So I'll just turn the detail off in LittleNavMap. We are at Orcas Island, so you've probably seen this. We're just north of Seattle. We've seen it before. So we've got Fidalgo Island, Lopez Island, San Juan Island, and Orcas Island, Shore Island, Blakely Island, and it's a famous part of the world. Just over to the west of us, we've got Vancouver Island. Just to the north of us, we've got Vancouver. So I apologise for my speaking this evening a little bit. I've got a really bad head cold, and it's making it very difficult to even think, let alone talk. So I'll see how I get on. Okay, so yes, you can see where we are on the map, and we'll go and try and fly this circuit that I've penciled in. So if we follow it fairly closely, we should have a good outcome, as I said earlier. Okay, so I'll turn the head tracking on, which might be helpful to us, it might not. So let's center it up first, and then press F12 a couple of times, which usually performs the magic trick of centering up all the sensors. So how do we get started in the Arrow 3 then? First thing we're going to do is come over to the tablet and turn off the chocks and the tie downs. And then you'll find there's a small little switch on the dashboard called ICOM, and if we click on that, we can remove the tablet, because the tablet has now done its job as far as we're concerned. Okay, so the first thing we do is go and look down on the floor on the left hand side, and we're looking for the fuel selector just to make sure that the tank we want is selected. So we've got the left tank, that's absolutely fine. So the next thing we're going to do is go and turn the battery and the alternator switches on, so they're over here. And then we can put the propeller to max. I'll use my controls to do that. Put the throttle to 1/2 inch open. Mixture stays on lean for the moment. Put the fuel pump on. And then mixture to rich. And then back to 50%. Okay. So then we're going to go and put the beacon light on. And you would shout out the window at this point, if this was the real world, to shout clear for the propeller. I'm just going to move my instructions a bit further down. I'll put a link to the instructions in the notes of the video. And then we can turn the key round to start. As soon as we've got a good start, fuel pump can come off, mixture can go to rich. And we can go and have a look at these needles and the RPM. We ideally want to idle at 1000 RPM. So it's not going to happen very quickly. The oil temperature will come up into the green, it just takes a while. But we've got more to do around the cockpit, so we'll come back and check these a bit later on. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is make sure that the radios are configured. So we're going to go and switch on the various radios. It's all tremendously manual in this aeroplane, which is kind of lovely, I think. Turn the volumes up on the various things. Put the transponder on standby. We're not actually going to use any of this kit, but we'll turn it all on anyway. So there's the ADF. We'll go and turn on this rather geriatric GPS system and press enter, and then press nav twice, and it will light up with numbers in a few moments. We can switch this over to ADF mode, turn the volume up on it. So it's it's all rather lovely, but in a very kind of manual, recalcitrant kind of designed way. Anyway, what do we do next? Calibrate the altimeter. So I'm going to press B to shortcut that, and it will go and correct itself to the appropriate direction. Sorry, the appropriate altitude. And then we can taxi out to the runway, but before we do that, we haven't actually got a taxi light on this aeroplane, so we're going to use the landing light while we're taxiing. But we have got nav lights, and there's a roller here, so you roll it downwards, and the further you roll it downwards, the brighter the lights on the ends of the wings become. So let's go and jump outside and see that. So you should see the rotating beacon. It's doing its job. And you should see also we've got the lights on at the end of the wings. Okay. So we can come off the parking brake. Obviously I'm hiding the yoke at the moment, which probably isn't very useful to you because you can't see it. So there we go. So we're going to test the nose wheel steering, test the toe brakes. Yes, we stopped. And we're going to taxi out. On our taxi we could go and put the flaps to take-off position. Can we see good flap movement? Yes, we can. We can test the control surfaces as well while we're taxiing. Make sure everything's looking correct. See what they're doing in the clubhouse here at Orcas. This is the Orbex version of the Orcas scenery, by the way. It's very, very good. It's quite basic, but then it doesn't affect frame rate at all, but it looks very, very atmospheric. So I'm going to bring us to a halt here at the holding point. Whoa! Good job I slowed down then, wasn't it? Got a runaway fuel truck. So I'm going to hold us here to do our run-up test. So how do we go about doing a run-up test? We put the parking brake on, obviously. We're going to run the engine up to 2000 RPM. So we're watching that RPM needle down at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so I'm just going to pop the yoke off again. What we're going to do is switch to the left magnetos and watch the drop. We don't want it to be more than 150 revs drop. So it's only just dropped about 100. Go to the right bank of magnetos. We shouldn't see more than a 50 RPM movement, and we haven't. And we come back to both, and the revs climb back, which is all good. So back to 1000 RPM. Oh, the other thing we can do is cut back to idle completely and just see how far the revs drop. We're looking for it to drop to about 800-ish, and that's perfect. So lift it back to 1000. Okay, so go and line up on the runway, and then we can go and put the landing lights already on in our case, but then the anti-collision lights as well. I need to go and have a read. I couldn't find anything in the pilot operating handbook about which lights to use if you don't have a taxi light. It's like there's a vague instruction in the pilot operating handbook about checking the draw on the electrical system, but there's no way of measuring that with the needles you get in this version of the aeroplane, so it's a bit of a problem. Okay, so let's go and put the anti-collision lights on, pitot heat on, and we're pretty much ready to roll. We want to put the transponder on as well. Okay, so off the parking brake, ease the throttle. Oh, before we do anything, let's just hold our horses for a moment. To make our circuit nice and easy to think about, we're going to line up the HSI course needle with the direction we're pointing. It will just help as a visual reference of the runway direction as we do our circuit. So full throttle. We're going to rotate at 60 knots, give it quite a lot of backstick, so we're in the air immediately, although it's a heavy lump, this aeroplane. So gear up, So then we keep rotating to hold 80 knots using attitude, or just below 80 knots preferably. Watch out for the airplane trying to rotate, it will weathercock into the wind. So we're watching the speed. We're trying to climb out to about 1,000 feet above sea level. Yeah, look, the airplane is trying to rotate underneath us. We'll drop the nose gently to let the speed increase. We're getting a little bit slow. We're at 1,000 feet, so level out, throttle back to 75%. Trim the aeroplane. We're just gently climbing, that we don't want to be gently climbing. Then we've got a reference point of the island appearing, so we'll do our left turn, doing a coordinated turn, also lining the wingtip, also keeping an eye on the altitude, so we can afford to drop a little as we turn. So we want 90 degrees worth of turn. And level out. Gained 200 feet, look, in a matter of moments, so we're just going to gently let that fall back away. There's some mist out in the bay, isn't there? So then we'll turn left, another 90 degrees. We still haven't lost that 200 feet that we gained. If we want some lights in the cabin, we can do that by rolling this down. Also turning this on. Whoops. This is the problem with head tracking and mouse. So that we're now flying the reciprocal, which is good. So let's get rid of that couple of 100 feet that we've been struggling to lose. So I'm actually turned out a little bit earlier than I really would like to. I'd like to be a bit further this way, so I'm going to correct slightly on the pattern here. I really want to be aiming for this hillside. So if I go and show you on the map what we're doing here. Yeah, we turned in far too early, look. Oh, we got distracted along the way. Has the wind got up? Is that what's causing? Yeah, look, the wind has got to come out of nowhere. We've got 14 knots worth of wind. That wasn't there when we were on the ground at all. Suddenly the wind has got up, so we haven't catered for the wind, therefore we've been pushed massively off of our circuit. Just shows how much a small aeroplane can be affected by even a small amount of wind. Okay, so as we approach the hill, we'll use it as our reference point to turn left through 90 degrees, and we will drop through 500 feet gently on the base leg. Okay, so throttled out to 50%, turning through 90 degrees. And letting that altitude fall off slowly. This aeroplane is bucking around like you wouldn't believe. It's difficult to see unless you're actually controlling it, and the simulator, as you can see, is trying to throw curveballs at me as well. Obviously I don't want to get too low because of this hill. So we go around this and then we try to turn out on the angle of the shoreline. So we'll begin our turn. We're quite low here, but that's by design. So we get the gear down. You can see the runway coming. So we can hold 500 feet. And start feeding the flaps in. Nice stabilised approach. It's a shame this runway doesn't have VASI lights or anything like that, so we just have to judge this. It does have some guidance, radio guidance, but we're not using it obviously, we're just doing a visual approach. Ah, there's the VASI lights. Were they not working? Didn't notice them earlier. Hold the plane off the ground, and we're down. Flaps up. And we can exit up here to turn around, but I'm going to do a U-turn and go back to the main parking area. So we'll leave all the lights on while we're on the runway, so we can be seen easily. So yeah, they didn't go entirely to plan. They didn't realise, that's my own fault for not checking the windsock. Look down here, the windsock's not showing anything. So we would have got that from the METAR that out over the bay there was actually quite strong winds, and they immediately caught us and pushed us quite a long way off track. That's why remember I said it was the aeroplane was bucking around. That was the wind hitting it. Okay. Let's just go and park up adjacent to the fuel pumps. Actually, there's some parking marks here, aren't there? Very good. Okay, so parking brake on. One way to starve the engine is to pull the fuel, so you use up any of the remaining pieces of fuel that are in the engine, and then we can turn the magnetos off and basically go through and turn all the lights off. So pitot heat off, anti-collision light off, beacon light off, landing light off. We should have had the landing light off as soon as we left the runway really. And then alternator off and battery off. And we're cold and dark. So the doors actually work in this as well, which is quite nice. You can unlatch at the top, unlatch here, and then you can push the door open. It's very cool. Anyway, there we go. So that's the kind of correct-ish procedure, the kind of, as well as you can do in the simulator with what you've got to play with this version of the JustFlight version of the PA-28. So it's very good. If you have a look in the notes, you will see the download to the PDF I've written detailing the checklist, and I put some keyboard shortcuts in, so if you do like using the keyboard to move around the aeroplane, you can use those. Otherwise, once you get familiar with where things are, it's not a difficult aeroplane to configure and fly. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you enjoyed that. So there we go, the Piper PA-28 Arrow 3 from JustFlight, and this was at Orcas Island from Orbex. Okay, I'll see you again soon.